Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. Here we're cutting out the blanks, we're sizing these, we got them from the jungle store. They were supposed to be 2 inch by 2 inch, they were not. Here we're cutting them to length, 9 inches each, and it makes a whole lot of pieces. I use this old school pencil sharpener, I just think it works better. Gives me something to do while I'm in the shop watching the machine running back and forth. Alright, now the pieces have to be labeled, or I choose to label them all the way around, mark them all the way around, so that I can maintain or confirm my origin when I'm making these chess pieces. We put a crosshair on every single piece, that way there's no mistaking that I haven't lost the origin. They come out pretty nice, and as you can see, the whole end of the piece gets turned into the chess piece, so we have to be very precise. And here's a quick shot of the programming. If you'd like to see how this is done, I do have a detailed video on this, and you can check that out. It's in a playlist labeled Carveco Tutorials, and I show you step by step how you make these chess pieces on a machine that shouldn't really do it, shouldn't be able to do it without a rotary. No need for a rotary to make these things. It does take quite a little bit of time, but you don't need a rotary. And there you get a good shot of my jig that I use to hold these things down. And when I made these pieces, I was still using my old machine. And it came out pretty good. They did very well. But I got to believe the new machine would have been a lot nicer to do this with. Here I show you how we remove the piece from the block. Very careful not to trim your knuckles off while you're doing this. And that is a rook for the good side, for the good team. Flattening the bottom so they don't wobble on the board. Whole lot of back and forth in this business working on a CNC machine. And as you can see, 32 pieces of stock are ready to go. And it was a tremendous amount of time making this chess set. Each piece took averagely 8 to 10 hours to complete. Here we're seeing the roughing passes. And one thing that I do on both of my machines constantly is try to keep the dust off them while they're carving. That's an old broom handle, or an old broom that I took the handle off of. And here's how the jig works. Take the piece out, flip it 180, slide it back in, lift the clamping bar, and lock it back down. You have to maintain 0 origin when you're cutting these pieces out, or they just won't line up. They just won't look good. You'll have a seam that runs down the side of them. Again, if you check out that video, you'll see exactly what I'm telling you. So you got a little piece like this. You want to put it on here and spray the poly. How do you do it? Because you don't want to pick it back off and get your fingerprints all over it. Simple. Grab yourself some cardboard and a utility knife. Cut a strip off of it. Cut another piece about that size so you can put it on there. Hot glue gun. Little dab in the center. Take the piece. Hot glue it to the piece of cardboard. Set it on and spray away. That way you can take it back off without having to touch the piece. So who knew that you could get a piece of this plastic from your local big box store? I didn't. Anyway, it's 3/8 of an inch thick, white plastic, and we're going to use this to create the mold for the chessboard. We are going to create a chessboard that is roughly 20 by 20. Finished dimensions are 18 1/4 by 18 1/4, but I'm going to cut this thing down so it'll create a 20 by 20, and I'm going to use the pieces that I cut off to create the mold. Now the front side has some texture, the back side is smooth. We're also going to take a piece of 1/2 inch plywood and we're going to put it underneath the bottom of the mold, and once that's glued down, we're going to use some thick sew to glue that down to the plywood. That'll create 2 layers. Then we're going to pour the epoxy inside this. That'll be 3 layers with an overall dimension roughly 1 inch thick. Once that's done, we're going to take the mill, the 1-finity, and we're going to cut. I take that back. We're not going to cut it off first. We're going to lay in our squares first, backfill that color. The next set of squares, we'll backfill that color. Then we're going to cut it off to the finished dimension. Then we're going to wrap it in a black walnut edge band all the way around the top. And then we'll probably, most likely, the plan is anyway, to flood fill the top so that it's completely glazed over on the top, nice and shiny, easy peasy lemon squeezy. So let's start by cutting this thing down and making the mold. All right, so we got the base cut, we've got the pieces cut, and you might have thought I was going to put these like this to create the frame, but that's not the case. I'm going to put them smooth side down. Let me start over. We're going to put the base smooth side up. We're going to put the brace pieces or the frame pieces smooth side down so they meet up together. So the texture on these is on the top. We're going to slide this over a little bit so I've got plenty of clamping room here and plenty of clamping room on this side. And the reason I'm not standing them up like this is to eliminate the inconsistencies in the saw cut. In case I have a misstep on the table saw, I know that this is a consistent thickness. So when I put these on here like so, glue them in place, seal up the corner, seal it up all the way around, I've got a dead even, exactly the same height surface. I'm only going to pour this 3/8 of an inch deep, and I'm going to rely on 1 or 2 or however many layers, like I said in the beginning, of plywood to create enough strength so that I don't crack the board. We'll go in 3/8 of an inch deep with the first layer. The squares will be in 0.20 each one of them so they don't hit the white plastic, and we'll just backfill and rock and roll. So next step is to put these on here, square them up, glue them in place. I'll use the spring clamps to hold the edge ones on the line. We'll make a mark so that we're not all cattywampus like that, and we will be good to go. I've got my glue on the panel. How do I stop it from flying around? Some people use salt. Don't use salt. I'm not seasoning a food item here. 2 pieces of sandpaper does the same thing, and it will not move. Now don't be jealous of my high dollar clamps here that most people don't have. You can't just get this style of clamp anywhere. And by the way, there is an up and a down to a concrete block. Let me make sure that's in the camera. It is. When you look at a concrete block, and you look at this surface versus this surface, this is the bottom. See, there's no taper here in the center web. If you flip it over, there is a taper here, and that's why you see all the masons grab them with one hand and can move them. Because of that taper, it creates a place for the concrete to go on the top of the block. That's a little tip for you. So now we're going to let this thing set up, get hard, put it on the mill, fill it with epoxy, and start cutting squares out of it. All right, so we're level, we're clamped down, and now I'm going to take this piece here and I'm going to glue it over here like so to create a, I don't know, do we want to call it a false zero or a predictable zero? Something that I can use to put the machine on top of to regain my Z height once I fill this with epoxy. Then I can always take this over and drop it on and have the exact same height throughout the carve when I'm surfacing and etc. So now we got to mix up some epoxy and put it on here. My father used to call it poxy, and I would laugh at him every time he said it. But all right, let's mix it up and pour it in. So here's what we're going to use for epoxy. I'm not sponsored by Total Boat. I'd be happy to be sponsored by Total Boat, but I'm not. At any rate, on their website, Total Boat has a epoxy calculator to show you how much you need. Basically, height, width, depth. Put it in there and it spits out the number you need. So just keep that in mind when you're doing some epoxy. Total Boat has a handy calculator there. The calculator says we need 80 ounces of liquid. I got a handy dandy measuring pail here. We're going to go a little over 20 ounces, obviously 80 divided by 2 because you have a 50-50 mix, hardener to the, I don't know what you call the other stuff. I guess you just call it the resin. So clean pail, 50-50 mix. We're going to go a little over 20 ounces for each half. I'm going to start with the resin, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed here. Wish me luck. It's hard to believe that it's going to take a little over a half a gallon to fill that thing. But that's what the thing says, so that's what we're going to do. I didn't know these little extra pieces of plastic were going to come in handy, but these little extra pieces of plastic are coming in handy. If my lovely assistant will start the timer, we'll do 3 minutes. Moment of truth. Let's see how accurate we are. Atlas is trying to add his part to this by putting a dog hair on there. Let's see. Looks like cake batter. To review, when we cut in the squares, we're going to cut in every other square and create a different color to create the checkerboard. But the outside frame is not important. The final thing we'll do is cut the board loose. We'll go through each layer all the way to the wasteboard and cut our perfect chessboard. And I hope the board does justice to the pieces, which I believe it will. And the beauty of this plastic is the likelihood of bubbles coming up through because of the epoxy soaking into wood are almost nil. You're not going to have it. So it takes away the whole worry of bubbles constantly when you're trying to do this. But I think we're in pretty good shape. We're going to let it go overnight, maybe a day, extra day, and then we'll start cutting in the squares.